Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a policy move that, well, basically sent shockwaves through global security circles. We're talking about the sudden end to a 33-year U.S. pause on explosive nuclear weapons testing, ordered by President Trump. It arguably brought us closer to a new arms race than we've been in decades.
It really did. It's a moment heavy with history.
So we've gone through a lot of material security analyses, government statements, expert takes.
Yeah.
Our mission, to give you the full picture, unbiased. What did this order really mean? What actually triggered it? And, what are the incredibly high-stakes consequences? Okay, let's get into it.
Absolutely. I mean, the last time the U.S. set off a nuclear weapon was 1992. So this order didn't just raise eyebrows. It shattered decades of global understanding against explosive testing. The result was immediate confusion worldwide and, frankly, real fear that we're seeing the most dangerous escalation between superpowers since, the 1980s.
Let's start with just how sudden it was. The announcement appeared on social media, just dropped there. And only hours before President Trump was set to meet China's President Xi Jinping, he specifically ordered and this is maybe the first wrinkle, the Department of War.
Which doesn't exist anymore. It's the Department of Defense.
Right, the DoD. Ordered them to start testing our nuclear weapons on an equal basis and said it would begin immediately.
And the justification he gave was, twofold. First, pointing fingers, saying it had to do with others. They seem to all be nuclear testing. Second, the usual argument, America needs a credible nuclear deterrent, and testing is somehow responsible to make sure the weapons still work.
But right away, our sources jump on that equal basis idea, especially the numbers.
Oh, completely. Trump claimed the U.S. has the most nukes, but the arms monitoring groups, they paint a different picture. Russia actually leads maybe around 5,580 warheads. The U.S. is close behind, somewhere between 5,000 and 5,200, give or take.
And China, the country he was about to meet with.
A distant third. Maybe 600 warheads, although that number is growing fast, which is a whole other part of this story.
Okay, so the numbers don't quite fit the equal basis claim, but the timing, that seems really key here.
Absolutely critical. This whole thing happens about 100 days before the New START treaty runs out in February 2026.
And just to remind everyone, New START is basically the last major arms control treaty left between the U.S. and Russia. It limits deployed warheads and launchers.
Exactly. So you look at the timing, the vague language, it starts to feel less like a serious plan to actually test and more like maybe a really aggressive bargaining chip before the treaty expires.
But what a chip to play. I mean, threatening to break a 33-year global norm against testing.
It's incredibly high-stakes leverage. Unusually dangerous leverage, you could say.
Okay, this is where it gets really murky and, frankly, fascinating. The order itself was super unclear. We have to ask, did he mean actual mushroom clouds, explosive nuclear detonations underground? Or was he talking about testing the missiles, the delivery systems that carry the warheads? Because those are very different things.
And that ambiguity split experts and officials right down the middle. It tells you a lot about how the order was received. Let's look at the two main ways people read this based on the sources. Interpretation one is sort of the technical argument that testing is necessary to make sure the weapons work.
Okay, makes sense on the surface.
However, and this is a big however, the sources are pretty much unanimous. U.S. scientists already maintain the stockpile without explosions. They use something called stockpile stewardship.
Right, I've heard of that. It involves supercomputers.
Exactly. Supercomputers, advanced simulations, non-explosive experiments, powerful lasers. They use all this tech to check the warhead's reliability and lifespan without actually setting one off.
So the scientific consensus seems to be explosive testing isn't really needed for upkeep?
That's what the sources strongly suggest. Which brings us to interpretation number two, the political angle.
The idea that this wasn't about science, but about sending a message.
Precisely. This view holds the order was highly performative, a show. A display of strength, maybe. A lot of analysts think it was a line in the sand drawn just before meeting Xi Jinping, what security folks call nuclear signaling, climbing a rung on the escalation ladder to show rivals you're serious.
And the logistical details, or lack thereof, seem to support that posturing idea.
Definitely. Ordering the Department of War, the wrong department, didn't help.
Because it's actually the Department of Energy that handles the technical side of nuclear testing, right? Not the Pentagon.
Correct. And when reporters asked for specifics, Trump's answer was pretty vague. It'll be announced, we have test sites, not exactly detailed planning.
And zooming out, there were huge domestic issues that made the whole threat seem, well, less credible.
Yeah, the sources pointed out this order came during a U.S. government shutdown.
Seriously, a shutdown.
Yes. Which meant some key civilian personnel involved in nuclear weapons, safety, and security were actually furloughed, temporarily laid off.
So you're threatening a massive strategic shift while the people needed to manage it might not even be at work.
It's a major contradiction. Plus, logistically, there was simply no money approved by Congress for restarting testing infrastructure. Zero budget allocated.
It does make the threat ring a bit hollow, doesn't it? Threatening this huge escalation when you might not even have the basic administrative capacity lined up.
It certainly raises questions about the credibility.
Okay, let's circle back to his main justification. Others seem to all be nuclear testing. Who was he actually talking about? What were Russia and China doing?
Good question. The U.S. seems to have been reacting to recent tests of very advanced delivery systems by Russia and China. Not explosive tests, but tests of the things that carry the bombs.
Like what, specifically?
Well, Russia had recently tested its new nuclear-powered cruise missile, the Brevesnik, and, maybe more worrying, the Poseidon underwater drone.
Ah, the Poseidon. That's the one they say can trigger a radioactive tsunami.
That's the one. Travels underwater for huge distances, supposedly can't be intercepted, and could, create a massive radioactive wave, a truly destabilizing piece of tech.
Terrifying. But Russia claims these were tests of the drone and the missile system itself, not the warhead exploding.
Exactly. That's the crucial distinction Russia makes. They insist these were system tests. Their last explosive nuclear test was way back in 1990.
In China.
Similar story. Their arsenal, as we said, has grown rapidly, maybe doubled in 5 years. And they did test an intercontinental ballistic missile recently, but again, their last actual nuclear detonation, 1996.
Okay, so let me just make sure I've got this straight because it seems really important. The only country that has actually conducted an explosive nuclear test this century is North Korea, with their last one in 2017.
Correct.
So the U.S. order seems to be threatening to break the global taboo on explosive testing in response to rivals testing delivery systems.
That is the fundamental disconnect. It looks like a disproportionate response, a huge leap up the escalation ladder, threatening to restart detonations because others are building better missiles or underwater drones.
It completely changes the nature of the game.
It overturns the whole non-proliferation framework we've had for decades, essentially.
So, given how big a step this was, how did the world react?
Swiftly, and not positively. The UN Secretary General was very blunt. Nuclear testing can never be permitted under any circumstances. He cited the catastrophic risks, the environmental damage, the health consequences, all the reasons the moratorium existed in the first place.
What about other countries, especially nuclear powers or potential ones?
Iran jumped in, calling it regressive and irresponsible, basically calling the U.S. a nuclear-armed bully. More significantly, perhaps, the CTBTO, that's the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, the global watchdog for tests, warned this would be incredibly harmful and destabilizing for non-proliferation efforts worldwide. They see it as potentially wrecking the system they exist to monitor.
You can see why. The strategic risk feels enormous.
It is. Think about the history. The U.S. did over 1,000 tests. Russia, over 700. China, fewer than 100.
So if the U.S. breaks the moratorium and starts testing again?
It basically gives a green light, or at least political cover, for other countries to catch up.
And here's maybe the biggest irony, the real aha moment. The source is highlighted for you, the listener.
Just keep going on.
The country that stands to gain the most from a return to explosive testing is probably China.
Exactly. Because they have relatively little historical test data compared to the U.S. and Russia. Resuming testing would let them gather crucial data, refine their warhead designs, knowledge they currently lack extensive data on.
So the U.S. trying to assert dominance could actually hand its main strategic competitor a massive advantage.
Precisely. It potentially provides the justification for China to start its own major testing program to close the gap. It completely flips the script on credible deterrence.
It really does. And we haven't even touched on the practical barriers if the U.S. actually tried to conduct an explosive test.
They're huge. Analysts figure it would take at least 3 years, maybe more, and hundreds of millions of dollars just to get the old Nevada test site ready again.
It's been shut down for decades, right?
And then heavily contaminated.
Very contaminated, yes. Needs massive infrastructure work. And beyond the practicalities, exploding a device would directly violate a U.S. law passed by Congress back in 1993 that actually wrote the testing moratorium into law.
So you'd need Congress to change the law, find hundreds of millions of dollars, spend years rebuilding a contaminated site, all based on an order that seemed ambiguously worded and perhaps politically motivated.
That sums up the challenge pretty well, a political directive facing massive logistical, financial, and legal hurdles.
So where does this leave us now? What's the big picture takeaway?
Well, the immediate fear was plunging into a dangerous new arms race where the line between, just posturing and actual provocation gets really blurry. The margin for error feels incredibly thin, especially given all the confusion around the order itself.
It creates so much uncertainty. It does, and you have this core tension. Some in the U.S. defense world might see testing as necessary for deterrence against new threats. But the overwhelming view among arms control experts is that it's incredibly reckless. It risks unraveling the entire global non-proliferation regime. It could encourage states that don't have nukes, think maybe Australia or countries in the Middle East, to reconsider if the old rules just collapse.
A real potential free-for-all.
Potentially.
And maybe a final thought for you to chew on. If the U.S. couldn't even guarantee it could resume testing quickly because of domestic issues like shutdowns or lack of funding,
Yeah.
what does that signal to rivals? Does that apparent inability to follow through actually undermine the credibility of the threat itself? Was this a genuine strategic shift or just a particularly clumsy, dangerous bluff in a high-stakes negotiation that might have backfired?
That's the lingering question. Did it achieve its signaling goal, or did it just reveal limitations and damage credibility in the process? Hard to say for sure.